The morning sunlight came in through the half-open blinds, casting pale streaks across the kitchen floor. The house was quiet, except for the soft clinking of spoons against cereal bowls. Eleanor stood at the stove, her back straight, her hands moving without thought as she flipped the last piece of toast onto a plate. Marcus entered the room, dressed in a crisp suit, his tie hanging loosely around his neck. He didn't say good morning. He didn't even look at her. "Where's my white shirt?" he asked, his voice sharp. Eleanor turned and placed a plate of eggs and toast on the table in front of him. "In the laundry basket. I didn't get to it last night," Marcus scoffed, shaking his head with a cold smirk. "Of course you didn't. I guess being a housewife is just too exhausting, huh?" Lily, their 10-year-old daughter, looked down into her cereal. Ethan, 7, glanced from his mother to his father, lips tight, saying nothing. Elena said nothing either. She simply returned to the sink, quietly rinsing a cup. Marcus wasn't done. "Seriously, what do you do all day? Sit around, watching TV? You're not working, not earning. I go out and grind every single day so this family has a roof over its head, and all I ask is for a clean shirt. Is that too much?" Eleanor kept her hands busy. Her heart was pounding, but her face stayed calm. She'd heard it all before, but today, something inside her was different. A line had been crossed that she hadn't even known existed. "You know it's sad," Marcus continued, reaching for his coffee. "Other men have wives who do something with their lives. You're just here." He didn't notice the way her hand paused slightly at the faucet. He didn't see how her shoulders straightened, not in anger, but in quiet resolve. She turned around and placed the coffee in front of him, her eyes meeting his for just a moment, calm, steady. "Thanks," he muttered, not looking at her. But Eleanor was looking, not at him, at her children, at their silence, at the sadness in Lily's eyes, at the way Ethan had stopped asking to play. She looked at the breakfast table, at the perfectly cooked eggs, the fresh fruit, the lunches already packed and waiting by the door. And then she looked at Marcus, really looked at him. Something inside her shifted, something subtle but strong. He thought she was powerless, but something cracked open in that moment, and from that crack, something began to shine. Not rage, not fear, something else, something new. Before she became just a housewife, Eleanor Carter used to be someone else. She was the girl who filled every notebook with drawings, the one who stayed up late painting until the sun came up. Back in college, she dreamed of opening a creative studio for children, a warm, colourful place where kids could come to paint, build, imagine. People used to say she had a spark, and she believed it too once. Then she met Marcus. He was smart, ambitious, charming. When he talked, people listened. He was going to be someone important. He knew it. And soon, so did she. When they got married, Elena promised to support him. So she worked 2 jobs while he finished business school. She packed lunches, made flashcards, and encouraged him through every tough exam. She believed in his dream, and when he got his first big job, they moved into a beautiful house. When Lily was born, she left her own work behind to raise their daughter. Then came Ethan. 1 year turned into 2, then 5, then 10. Somewhere along the way, her spark faded. Marcus never told her to stop dreaming. He just made her feel like hers didn't matter. Now, years later, Marcus had climbed high, vice president at a top firm, always flying to meetings, shaking hands with people in suits. He smiled at everyone at the office, laughed at their jokes, held doors open. He was charming, polite, and successful. At home, he was different. He rarely asked Elena how she felt. He never noticed her new haircut, or the dinners she spent hours making. When she spoke, he barely listened. He called her dramatic if she got upset, sensitive if she cried. He told her she was lucky to have a man who worked hard, who gave her everything, but she didn't feel lucky, not anymore. He compared her to women he worked with. "You know, Amanda runs a department and still makes time for her kids," he'd say, sipping his wine. "You could do more if you wanted," as if raising children and managing a household wasn't work, as if her exhaustion wasn't real. Sometimes he'd joke about her in front of others, not cruelly, but enough to sting. "She used to be an artist, believe it or not," he'd say, smiling as if it were a joke. "Now she's the queen of laundry." Elena would smile too, because what else could she do? But inside, the hurt settled like dust in her chest. The only person who truly saw her was Monica. Monica had been Elena's best friend since college. She'd been through a painful divorce years ago, and came out stronger. She ran her own business now, lived in a small apartment filled with light, and spoke her mind without apology. She told Elena often, "You gave so much. Now it's time to give something back to yourself." Elena wanted to believe that. She really did. Late at night, when the house was quiet, she would sit at the kitchen table with a pencil in her hand and paper in front of her. She sketched softly, ideas for a children's cafe filled with art stations, cozy nooks, bright walls, and laughter. It was a dream she kept tucked away in a folder no one knew about, not even Marcus. She didn't dare speak it aloud, not yet. The kids had changed too. Lily used to be bubbly, always asking questions, always singing. Now she was quiet, careful. She watched her mother with worried eyes. Ethan had started waking in the middle of the night, crawling into Elena's bed without a word. He clung to her like he was afraid she'd disappear. Eleanor felt like she was living two lives. In one, she made breakfast, washed dishes, packed backpacks, and smiled for the neighbors. In the other, she stared at the ceiling at 2 a.m., wondering how she had become invisible. Some days, she felt close to falling apart. Other days, a voice whispered inside her, small but steady, "You are still here. You are still you." She didn't know which way things would go, whether she would finally break or finally break free. But she knew something had to change, because if she didn't move soon, she might lose herself completely. And if that happened, what would be left for her children to look up to? They deserved better, and so did she. The restaurant was fancy, the kind of place with dim lighting, quiet music, and cloth napkins folded into perfect shapes. Marcus had invited a few colleagues and their spouses for dinner, people he wanted to impress. Elena wore her best dress, soft blue with small flowers, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She sat beside Marcus, listening politely as everyone talked about work, travel, business deals. For most of the night she stayed quiet, nodding, smiling, sipping her water. Then someone asked her a question. "So, Elena, what do you do with your time? Must be nice to stay home and relax." Elena blinked, surprised. Her fingers tightened around her glass. But instead of brushing it off like she usually did, something inside her leaned forward. "Well, actually, I've been working on something," she said softly. "I'm designing a small children's art cafe, a creative space where kids can paint, draw, read, while parents have coffee or tea. I want it to be colourful and warm, like a little world made just for them." The table went quiet for a beat. One of the women smiled kindly. Another man raised his eyebrows, and then Marcus laughed. A loud, full laugh that turned a few heads from other tables. "She thinks she's a businesswoman now," he said, grinning. "You've been sketching with crayons again, babe?" A few people chuckled, not knowing what to do. Someone tried to change the subject. Eleanor sat frozen, her face burning. She felt small, so small. Her hands were trembling slightly under the table, but she forced them to stay still. She didn't speak again that night, not even when Marcus slipped his arm around her for a photo. Back at home, after the kids had gone to bed, Marcus poured himself a drink and sat on the couch. He was still in a good mood. "You've got to stop taking everything so seriously," he said. "You embarrassed yourself a little, that's all. That cafe thing, it's cute, really. But let's be honest, you wouldn't even know where to start." Elena stood in the doorway. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just listened. And in that silence, something inside her gave way. She walked upstairs, opened the closet and pulled out a suitcase. She folded clothes quietly, 2 sets each for Lily and Ethan, a few of her own, toothbrushes, socks, pajamas. She walked into the kitchen, picked up her folder, the one with all her cafe designs, and removed a few pages. She placed them neatly on Marcus's desk. The top drawing showed a child smiling, surrounded by bright, swirling colours. Then she tiptoed into the kids' room, gently woke them and whispered, "We're going to Aunt Rachel's for a little while." Lily didn't ask why. Ethan just held her hand. They left before dawn. No note, no message, just the silence of a woman who had finally decided that silence wasn't enough anymore. When Marcus came downstairs hours later, the house was too quiet. No sound of breakfast being made. No kids laughing or fighting over cereal. No Elena. He found the papers on his desk, looked at them for a long time, then looked around the empty kitchen. For the first time in years, Marcus Carter didn't feel in control. He felt alone, and he didn't know how to fix it. The first few weeks at her sister's house were hard. Elena didn't sleep much. Her body was tired, but her mind wouldn't stop. Questions spun around her head. Had she done the right thing? Could she really build a new life? Would her kids be okay? Her sister Rachel gave her space but never let her feel alone. She made tea, watched the kids when Elena needed a break, and reminded her that strength doesn't always feel loud. Sometimes it's just not going back. Elena started looking for work. It wasn't easy. She hadn't had a job in years. But eventually she found a part-time position at a small bookstore cafe. The pay was modest, but the owner was kind and loved her ideas. Elena offered to add a kids' art corner. The owner agreed. Every day, Elena walked to work with her sketchbook in her bag. In quiet moments, she scribbled plans, ideas, and dreams. She started a small crowdfunding page online for her own children's art cafe. At first, only a few people donated. Then, Monica shared it on her social media. People began reaching out, mothers, teachers, even strangers. Messages came in saying, "This space needs to exist." With every kind word, Eleanor stood a little taller. Meanwhile, Marcus's world felt like it had caved in. He came home from work to an empty house. No one called Daddy. No little feet running down the stairs. No dinner waiting. Just silence. He called Eleanor the first night. She didn't answer. The second day, he sent a long text. No reply. He tried calling Lily's school. Rachel had already transferred the kids. The school wouldn't share anything. By the end of the week, Marcus had gone through every emotion: anger, denial, confusion. He told himself Elena was being dramatic, that she'd come back once she cooled off, but she didn't. A week later, Marcus found her crowdfunding page. He saw her drawings, colourful, alive, full of energy. He saw photos of her smiling, laughing with kids at her new job. He stared at the screen for a long time. He didn't recognize the woman in the pictures. She looked free. He started calling again, left voicemails. "Elena, please, let's talk. I miss you. The kids miss me. I was wrong." Still no answer. So he showed up at her work one afternoon, unannounced. Elena was behind the counter, helping a little girl pick out crayons. She saw him through the glass door and froze. He stepped inside, trying to smile. "I just want to talk." She shook her head calmly. "Not here. Please, I miss you. The kids need their father. I want to fix this." But his words were still about him. The owner came over. "Everything okay?" Elena nodded. Yes, he was just leaving. Marcus left, frustrated and confused. Days turned into weeks. Elena joined a support group for women starting over. There, she met other mothers, wives, daughters, each carrying their own pain. Some were rebuilding after divorce, others after years of emotional silence. One woman, younger, shy, reminded Elena of herself. She became her mentor. They talked often. Elena shared her story, not just the sadness, but the moments of light. "I thought I couldn't survive without him," Elena said once. "But I'm still here, and I'm stronger." Meanwhile, Marcus started unraveling. He couldn't focus at work. Meetings blurred. He drank more than usual. He sat for hours in the kids' empty room, staring at their toys. Sometimes he called just to hear their voices on voicemail. Lily eventually answered one call. "Hi," she said flatly. "Sweetheart, I miss you. I miss Ethan too. Can we talk?" She was quiet. Then, "You hurt Mommy." The line went dead. Marcus finally booked a therapy session. At first, he lied, said it was for coping with stress. But the therapist wasn't fooled. She listened, then looked him in the eyes and said, "You're not here for stress. You're here because you lost control, and now you don't know who you are without it." He didn't like that. He almost didn't go back, but something about her words stuck, so he returned. Session after session, the walls came down. He talked about his childhood, how his father worked all the time, how his mother cried behind closed doors, how he learned that power meant silence and love meant control. The therapist didn't let him hide. "You saw your mother become invisible, and instead of breaking that cycle, you repeated it with Eleanor." That truth hit hard. Marcus cried for the first time in years, not because he lost his wife, but because he saw who he had become. He didn't stop therapy. He stopped trying to fix things fast. He began listening instead of talking. Back in the new city, Elena kept moving forward. She raised more money for her cafe. She got approved for a small space, an old bakery downtown. She painted the walls with her kids. Ethan chose the blue. Lily made a sign that said Color Tree Cafe, a place to dream. The opening was still far away, but it was real, and it was hers. At night, she tucked her kids in, kissed their foreheads, and whispered, "We're okay now." And they were. Not perfect, not easy, but okay. Marcus still called sometimes. He sent letters, gifts, apologies. But for once, Elena didn't feel pulled to respond. She wasn't angry. She was simply done. She had found her voice. And this time, she was never going to lose it again. The cafe smelled like fresh paint and warm cinnamon. Bright colors filled the room. Paper butterflies hanging from the ceiling. Soft rugs on the floor. Little tables with cups full of crayons and brushes. Laughter bounced off the walls as children painted and parents sipped coffee nearby. It was opening day. Eleanor stood behind the counter, wearing a soft yellow blouse, her hair tied back, a paint smudge on her wrist. She had barely slept, but her heart was full. Her dream was alive. Rachel was there, beaming. Monica gave her a proud thumbs up from the corner. Her support group friends came too, bringing flowers and hugs. Even Lily and Ethan were helping. Ethan refilled napkin holders, while Lily passed out little thank you cards they had made by hand. Everything was perfect, until the door opened, and Marcus walked in. Elena froze. For a second the noise faded. She saw him in his dark suit, holding a bouquet of white lilies. People turned to look. Conversations paused. The smell of coffee and crayons still hung in the air, but the mood shifted. Marcus stepped forward slowly, eyes on Elena. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice shaking. "I wasn't invited. I just needed to be here today." He looked around the room, then back at her. His hands trembled slightly as he held the flowers. "I see it now," he said. "This place, this joy, this strength, it's all you. I never saw what you were carrying, what you gave, what you lost to keep our family going. I was blind, selfish, and cruel, and I hurt you." People watched in silence. "I've been in therapy," he continued. "I've been learning about myself, about my past, about how I became the kind of man who tears down the one person who stood beside him the longest." His voice cracked. "I don't want to be that man anymore. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope for it. I want to know my children again. I want a second chance. With them, and maybe with you." He took a breath. "I still love you, Eleanor." The room held its breath. Eleanor stood still, her hands lightly resting on the counter. Her heart beat loud in her ears. She looked at Marcus, really looked. Not the man she used to love, not the man who had left her feeling small, but the man who now stood exposed, vulnerable. She walked slowly around the counter. People moved aside as she stopped in front of him. She reached out and gently took the flowers. "Thank you," she said softly, "for the apology, for trying to grow." Marcus's eyes lit up, just a little. But then she added, calmly, clearly, "I forgive you." A pause. "But I won't go back to the woman I was, to be with the man you used to be." Silence again. "I've worked too hard to find her again, and I like who I am now." Marcus blinked. The hope on his face slowly faded into something else. Understanding. He nodded, just once. Then he whispered, "I understand." Eleanor stepped back and placed the flowers in a vase by the window. She turned to the customers and smiled. "Who wants a cookie shaped like a star?" Laughter and life returned to the room. The spell was broken. Marcus stood for a moment longer, watching her laugh with the children, watching the world she had built without him. Then, quietly, he walked out. The door closed behind him, and the sun kept shining through the big front window. Elena picked up a tray of fresh muffins and walked toward a group of parents. Her steps were steady, her voice warm. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The months that followed were full of growth. Eleanor's cafe became more than just a business. It became a place of healing. Word spread quickly. Parents told other parents. Teachers brought classes for special art days. The little cafe, with its warm colors and open heart, became a safe place for children to dream, to play, to create. She started a program for children going through hard times, kids whose parents had divorced, who had lost someone, or who just needed a quiet place to feel safe. Schools began to partner with her. Therapists reached out. She even began offering free art days once a month for families in need. Local newspapers ran stories about her. One headline read, "From housewife to hometown hero." But Eleanor didn't care about attention. What mattered to her were the moments. The child who smiled for the first time in weeks. The mother who said thank you with tears in her eyes. The gentle laughter filling the room where silence used to live. Her kids were doing better too. Lily joined a school art club and made new friends. She smiled more now, laughed louder, Ethan's nightmares faded. He loved helping in the cafe, handing out cookies and drawing signs for the window. Their small apartment above the cafe wasn't fancy, but it was full of love and laughter. Elena hung their drawings on the fridge. She sang while cooking. She let herself rest, let herself laugh. She finally felt whole, and somewhere in another city, Marcus was learning too. After Eleanor's quiet but strong words at the cafe opening, something changed in him. He didn't try to win her back again. Instead, he focused on fixing himself. He stayed in therapy, dug deep, faced truths he had avoided his whole life. He sold the house, the big, cold house that no longer felt like home. He took some of the money and donated it to a women's startup foundation in Elena's name. It was a quiet act. He never told her. He didn't need praise. He just wanted to give something back. Marcus still missed his children. He called, sent letters, and showed up to important school events when allowed. Slowly, he began to rebuild a relationship, not just with them, but with himself. He understood now that some things couldn't be undone, that sometimes the best thing a man can do is step back and let the people he hurt move forward. One evening, Elena sat by the cafe window after closing. A soft rain tapped against the glass. She opened her laptop and began typing a new blog post. She had started writing again, sharing small parts of her journey. To her surprise, thousands of people began reading. Women from all over sent messages, saying her words gave them courage. That night, her post was short. It read, "Sometimes, losing everything you thought you needed is what sets you free." She read it once, then twice. Then she hit publish and smiled. She turned off the lights, checked on her sleeping children upstairs, and slipped into bed with a peaceful heart. She was no longer the woman who lived in silence. She was Elena, and she was finally free. The night was quiet, the kind of calm that wraps around you like a soft blanket. Upstairs in the little apartment above the cafe, Elena tucked the kids into bed. Ethan was already half asleep, clutching his favorite stuffed bear. Lily leaned over for a kiss, her eyes heavy but peaceful. "Good night, sweetheart," Elena whispered, brushing hair from her daughter's forehead. "Love you, Mom," Lily murmured. Eleanor stood for a moment in the doorway, just watching them. The room was small but warm, safe, full of light and love. She walked to the kitchen, made herself a cup of tea, and stepped out onto the small balcony. The night air was cool. The stars sparkled above the rooftop. She wrapped her sweater tighter around her shoulders and took a slow sip. Her phone buzzed. She looked down. A message from Marcus. There was no long text, just a photo. It was Lily's old toy pony, the one with the pink mane and missing leg. He must have found it while cleaning out the garage. Elena stared at the picture for a while, then typed back, "Thanks. She's doing okay." She didn't wait for a reply. She looked up at the stars again, breathed in the quiet. She thought about how far she had come, from the woman who stayed silent, who felt invisible, to the woman who now stood tall, steady and sure. She smiled, a soft, real smile that reached her eyes. And for the first time in years, she really, truly is. Hi besties, thank you so much for watching to the end. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe. Bye.